Hello everyone, welcome to this session. We have Ryan who is presenting a technical deep dive of the MSIX app attached in Azure Virtual Desktop. Ryan will take over.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to present this How to Manage Devices event 2021. So good morning to everybody in the United Kingdom, which is 7:30, and good day to everybody else in the rest of the world. So today I'm going to be talking about Azure Virtual Desktop and specifically the components around MSIX app attach. So we're actually going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the whole conversation about delivering applications using Microsoft's modern dynamic application delivery capability through Azure Virtual Desktop. There's been some great sessions so far, and the previous session about Cloud PC. You can actually today deliver MSIX app attached to the Cloud PC, but I'll save that exciting information for another session, another time. So a little bit about me. So my name is Ryan. I'm the CTO for a company called AppCure. Headquarters are in the United Kingdom, but operate globally. And we're on a mission to solve the application challenge. And obviously, you can probably guess from my session that obviously I do a lot of work with applications and user computing. Microsoft MVP, vExpert, Parallels, Logging VSI. I've done quite a few things in the community, and I continue to kind of contribute. And I'll show you some of the stuff I've been working on in the background today in this session. And there's just, you know, a few bits and bats I've done. Recently, just finished the Mastering Azure Virtual Desktop book. That is available today globally, pre-order, both from Packet Publishing and from Amazon. And if you've got a mobile phone, you can scan the QR code there, which will help you find that. But effectively, this is the ultimate guide, as they're calling it, essentially allowing you to kind of have a reference guide for all the components of Azure Virtual Desktop, and also the ability to have it as an exam guide. So if you were looking to sit the AZ-140 exam and pass the Azure Virtual Desktop Specialty exam, this book will help you through that process, as well as all the other aids which are being brought out there. So moving on to the one second. So moving on to kind of the topic today, I wanted to set the scene about applications. Applications have been around since day one, right? We've had, if you cast your mind back 30 odd years, we started off with, you know, DOS and Linux, you know, or as it was Unix back then. And, you know, believe it or not, today, as we speak, businesses and organizations around the world are still using these type of systems. And why are they using these applications which are so old, or we perceive them to be legacy? Well, the challenge is that the application works, does what it needs to do, it says on the tin. The application has a purpose. The cost to move that application is essentially expensive. You know, so there's that challenge of, you know, to redevelop, what's that cost going to be for the organization? The you know, can it run on the modern operating system? If it can, do we need to reinvest? Do we need to go through all these processes? So there's lots of different reasons why people have these applications which are old. And, you know, one of the largest employer, I think number 3 or number 4 largest employer in the world is the British health system, the NHS. And they have to keep data for long periods of time, which can be up to 30 odd years. So the retention period as well for data can also have an impact.
It is good now. He is having videos.
Okay, so now I've set the scene on applications. Let's now take a look at the typical pain points in a VDI environment. So, you know, traditionally everybody puts all the apps in the image. You know, they'll build an image, they'll install all the apps on there, and they'll keep patching and updating that app, that image, operating system image, as it were. So they will, you know, do Windows updates every month and add additional applications. What's interesting though is a lot of people do forget sometimes to actually patch the applications. So there's, you know, code execution vulnerabilities and all sorts of other things which get missed out sometimes. Adobe is a prime example, right? Adobe requires patching, and if that's not done, then you open up some potential risks and vulnerabilities to the business. But by maintaining that support and management of that single image and keep updating it every month, what you're effectively doing is you're kind of playing with a lot of risk. That image could become corrupted, you could have problems with the image, and then you've got to start again and you've got to build a brand new image, which can take time. However, you can use tools like System Center Config Manager to kind of build a new image. But again, you're spending a lot of time on that particular image. And it is a pain point for a lot of organizations. They spend a lot of their monthly time on image management, image configuration, and an image update. And then we look at, we thought it was utopia when they released application layering and some of the other third-party products out in the market, which I sometimes class as vendor locking products, because no one likes to pay on top of the platform. They just want to, use the native Microsoft stuff. The challenge you've got with app layering, which used to be called Unidesk, which then moved over to Citrix layering, is the concept's great. You've got all these different layers and you can slide them in and out of the operating system. But, large organizations, again, it's taking a long time to get these applications into production. So why am I telling you all of this? Why am I talking about the pain points in VDI? Because I'm setting the scene really for something called dynamic application delivery, the ability to deliver applications on demand, in session, out of session, and giving the flexibility back to the user. And there's the ability to do self-service in the future, which is something I'm working on in the background, where you can have a workflow where a user wants an application, it sends a Teams message to the manager clicks approve, and their applications are delivered to that user immediately in session. It doesn't matter if they're in session or out of session, their applications are then made ready for that user. So just kind of looking more at, when it comes up, looking at the different operating systems we've seen over the years. At this point here, where we had Windows Vista, is when they made big changes to the Windows operating system. They changed the documents and settings, if you can remember, to program data and users. And this has caused a lot of problems for applications because they're looking in the wrong directories, the wrong areas of the operating system. That doesn't mean the application doesn't work. It just means you've got to do certain fix-ups and things for the application to run on the latest system. And as you see here, we've got Windows 7 and Windows 8, where we had Windows 10 and now we have Windows 11. So, whatever has been said at the time of release by the vendor, there's always going to be succession and progress. They're going to release new operating systems. Windows 10 was never going to be the last operating system. It may have been said, as maybe it probably would consider it as a flippant comment, but as you can see today, we've just been issued with Windows 11. And to be honest, despite all of the kind of UI changes I've had to learn, it's it's an improvement. And this is the thing, I use the picture of a map, because when you look at a new operating system for the first time, you're thinking, wow, why have they moved that? Where's that gone? Where's this gone? And you're trying to kind of navigate yourself around that. But in the next year or so, Windows 11 will become the default de facto operating system. People will use Windows 11 predominantly because of the security, because of the new flexibilities, and because of what Microsoft are doing in the background. Windows 10 is on the route for deprecation and end of service in the next 5 years. So people now need to start the process of moving to Windows 11. So new UI, I mentioned that already, and do my apps work? Good question. Well, 16-bit apps have never worked on 64-bit operating systems because of the instruction sets. However, doesn't mean they won't run. And obviously, in my demo today, we'll be talking about that in a little bit more detail. So that's pretty cool. So moving on to MSIX. So what is MSIX? Well, if we get rid of the X, we see MSI, which is an installer for Microsoft, right? And the X is the modern variation of that packaging format. So Microsoft over the years have been doing AppV, which is basically like app virtualization, where it containerizes the application. And like Tim Mangan, we're not related, as Tim Mangan said before, it serves a purpose to fix issues like running applications on multi-user environments, which couldn't be done natively. AppV had a purpose, and Microsoft are kind of changing gear, ramping things up, and some of these old capabilities, capabilities like AppV are going to be deprecated, end of life. AppV is on the route to be end of life in 2026, and MSIX will take its place. There is some challenges with MSIX today because it's based on how the application has been written. MSIX works in effect of a container, previously known as Helium, which is effectively when you run the application in an MSIX package, it is running inside a container. So it can read the global operating system, but cannot write to it. It can only write into its own directories, its virtual directories. So from a security perspective, running your applications in an MSIX container is a good thing, because if you do have any malware or malicious activity within the application, it's not going to go and infect your operating system. However, there is a few applications which don't have that success rate. We'll talk about success rates in more detail, but varies, and also depending on UAT will depend on what you class as an organization as successful. So let's have a look at MSIX structure and container. So the container itself, in there you can see the package, which is effectively a zip file. It's a .zip. So if you change MSIX to .zip, you'll be able to open that up and have a look inside, and you'll see all the files and the associations with it. So what's inside that? Let's have a look. So as you can see here, we've got the payload, which is the application files, the VFS, the directories for all of the app shortcuts, fonts, you name it. That's all in there under the package payload area. And then what we have is, the manifest. The manifest is the brain of the operation. That is what instructs the application to launch and how it works. The block map area, as it were, the app block map file is effectively where all of the files are indexed and detailed in there, so for performance and things like that. If you don't have an app signature file in the folder, that would indicate it's not signed. If you do, it's being signed with a code signed certificate, and then you can do things like code integrity checks as well. So what does that look like when I unzip it? So when I unzip it, you can see there, that's particularly what you'll see. You'll also note there's things like the user data, user classes, and the registry data files, which is basically storing some of the configurations for user and registry. And that's what an MSIX package looks like on a desktop. Please note that you can use MSIX on 2019 server. However, it's very limited in terms of its capability. So really, you want to be using Windows 10 build 2004 onwards and Server 2022 where possible. So let's now talk about the package support framework. So the package support framework, also known as PSF, is the ability to fix up applications in an MSIX container. So I mentioned that, where like hard-coded paths or problems with an application, missing shortcuts, you name it, there could be all sorts of different things wrong. Then you can use something called the package support framework to fix them issues. And how it works is you would configure a JSON file with the fix-ups, which would, and then you change the manifest to launch the launcher rather than the executable. So the line of business application or the entry point will be changed to this. And that will then call this config file, do all of what it needs to do in the config file, and then the application should run effectively inside its container. If the package support framework is not configured correctly, and you configure it to do things outside of the container, then that's on you. And also that removes the guarantees Microsoft make on a successful install and clean uninstall. And we'll talk a little bit about WinRot in a minute, but really, if you have problems with applications, then you'd use the PSF fix-up. You can't avoid it. I try and avoid it wherever possible, but in some cases it must be used. The only other thing to remember about the package support framework is by adding a step into launching an application does increase and add a delay in launching the application itself. So it has performance costs, it's a con, as it were. So let's have a look at the config file. So as you can see here, I've got the config file inside here. I've just opened that up and you can see it's connected to there. So you can see that in my redirection, I've done a file redirection fix up and then put a lot of patterns in there. And what you can see is for each individual different type, I know this is a bit of a simple example, but the README and the license file, I've basically set up different launchers to call them entry points, them executables as entry points. And that's basically what the PSF picks up. So these files here, as highlighted, go inside the MSIX package so that you can then call upon them features, and you can see runtime, fix-ups and stuff are in there. And I mentioned about has an impact. This is with PSF, you can see it's about 1 second. It's a small app, larger the app will be bigger. And then without PSF, you can see using the MSIX and then app attach, you can see that the performance is half a second around about. So just remember there is an impact. If you can get away with not using PSF, package support framework, do so. So what we're going to do now is we're going to flip over to my live lab screen because I am daring, as it were, and we're going to go and do, we're going to create an MSIX package, right? I'm going to do it properly. I know there's a lot of people who've shown you to create a package, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail so that you know exactly how it's done. And this is using Microsoft's native tool. We're not using any third parties. In some cases, you will need to, but today we're just going to be doing the basic. So I know everybody does it. We're going to use Notepad++. I know, boring, but it's nice and simple, and it's not a big package for time of demos on this presentation. So I've opened up the MSIX packaging tool, which you can do from the start menu, as it's there. And then obviously I've got my application here, so I'm just going to go and add a package. But before I do that, because everybody just does this, dive straight in. If you click on settings, what we can do is configure what we want. So you can see here, we've got things like, you know, do we want to do an integrity check? Do we want to add MSIX core? Do we want to enforce store requirements? Well, today I'm not going to do any of that, but I do want to make sure I hack up my certificate, which I've already done previously. And you can add your timestamp in there as well. So you can automate every time you open the tool. You won't need to do this because it's already taken care of for you. Then you've got things like data preferences, file exclusions. You can do all sorts of interesting configurations in here, however you want. So do your settings first. So we'll save them and we'll go back to here. And now we're going to go into the application package creation. I'm going to create a new package. We'll allow it to kind of warm up. Should turn off search, which we can do in a minute. It's going to check the driver, make sure the driver is installed. As you can see there, it's checking. If the driver is not installed, this will not work. And then disable that feature and then click next. So what I'm going to do is select the installer. So there's Notepad++. I'm just going to select that, desktop. And then if you're lucky, it will read all of the configuration of the installer and populate it. In this case, it's not. So I just need to put Notepad PP. Never use symbols where possible because it could be a problem. And then give it a version. In this case, it's going to be a custom version of 1. And I'm just going to call it Ryan's app. Click next. Then goes through the process of installation. So this is like a snapshot capture type of technology where it's basically going to read everything what's happening and capture that information. So I keep clicking next, but I'm just going to go for minimal, make sure everything's turned off. Yep, click next. I'm not going to create a shortcut on this occasion, and I've installed that package. And I'm going to run the app. You should always really run the app anyway to make sure it is working. Right, and then what you can do, if you go into settings and go into preferences, you can then customize various different things. You can turn on, so, you know, exit the close app, make a few different customizations in there. It's all sorts you can do in there to kind of customize languages. And as you're making these customizations, it's actually making registry changes, file associations and stuff. These reg changes are being captured and set within the package. So it's important that you do that. So you can do things like that. So turn that off. As you can see, you can then choose your search engine. Close that. You can do other things as well, but we're going to. So I've done that. I made a few changes in the settings. You know, nothing too fancy, but we made a few changes. You can import stuff as well, and that's all done. So everything I'm doing here is being seen by this. You can also restart if you need to, but in this case, because it's a small app, we're just going to do that. It now identifies that the launch or entry point as the first launch is that's the only entry point we need for this, and that's Notepad++ because it's a small app. So we click next. Yes, I'd like to move on. So what it does now is there any services? No, there's no services. And I click next. And then what it does is it says, do you want to create the package? And yes, I do. So I'm going to go and click create now, and that's going to now spit out our MSIX. And as you can see, it's been successfully created. I'm going to go into package editor now, and I'm going to have a look at what we've done. So there's the package information. There's no services. And then you can customize capabilities. So you can do things like run as administrator and specifically lock down how it functions on the operating system. So you can control what it can and can't do. And that's just by using the capabilities section, which writes into the manifest there. And then if we go into the registry, you can then start looking at various different things of what it's been doing and what it's captured, all the settings. Yeah. So you can see different things it may have added in there, and you can see if any changes you've made have been factored into that. So that's all done. And if I now go and run that, it will install that application. Look at that. Now it's running as an MSIX package. Right, just to save time and energy, there's a community tool I wrote some time ago to create the MSIX image. So once you've got an MSIX, you need to create an MSIX image. I'm just going to show you this now, just to save time later on. But effectively, what we do is we just open up my application, which you can find on my GitHub, labeled MSIX app attach. I'll also show you that in a minute on the web browser when we get into the AVD screen. I'm just going to create a simple package. So rather than using command line and messing about, we're just going to use this. I'm going to select the notepad, and then I'm going to go and just do a VHD today and select that MSIX package. Sorry, I've already selected MSIX output where I want it. So I'm just going to call this notepad, Ryan. And that should now have that populated. Now you're done, just click create. And what should happen now is that'll appear in a minute. And then when it's finished, the message box appears and you're done. So creating a simple MSIX image has never been so easier with a nice little simple GUI, which I will revamp later on. Okay, so back to the slides. Let's go back to key features. So WinRot. So previously, uninstall an application always leaves remnants of the application on the OS. That's a major problem because over a period of time, the OS becomes degraded, performance impacts, and all the rest of it, and cleanup is nigh on impossible. So Microsoft being able to remove the application and all of its components cleanly has a major advantage compared to previous technologies. However, if you are using PSF to write outside of that container, you will incur WinRot. So make sure you package carefully to avoid this problem of WinRot, and you achieve the uninstall success rate. Network bandwidth optimization, so streaming, downloading, pretty clever stuff, which this package container technology does. And then disk optimization as well for deduplication of files as well, which reduces the requirement of storage. So there's lots and lots of pros to having MSIX in your environment. So everybody talks about success rate, and I keep saying this, what apps have gone about this success? And I know Tim Mangan mentions about application fidelity, but the apps are never made clear. There's no actual metric based on application today. It's not been publicly shared. Don't know why, but it hasn't. So when I talk to Microsoft, I talk to other organizations, customers, vendors, they're all over the place. There's one organization I'm aware of which achieved a 99% success rate of moving to MSIX app attach. Others about 20%, others about 80, others at 90, others 50. And I always base it on the 80-20 rule. 80% of your apps will go into an MSIX and 20 will be problematic. Based on functionality and features, Tim Mangan has a really good way of describing this, about some of the features might not work, like context menus, which I believe hopefully will be fixed in the future. But some of these kind of issues might not impact some organizations. Some people might not be bothered by the context menu. Some people might not be bothered that this particular thing doesn't work. So it's based on each organization as well. So it's very hard for us to quantify. And that's why I always say it depends on the application. There's 176 million, circa 176 million applications in, this is a kind of an estimate in industry, and then there's over 176 million variations. So that's 7 trillion application types or variations out there, So what is the success rate of that? And that is unquantifiable today. We're not able to kind of see that. So let's move on to the more important topic of MSIX app attach. Before we can get to app attach, we need an MSIX package, as I've shown you, and we need that disk with the app in it. We're not able to progress without that. So app attach is just, it's not the MSIX itself. Everybody gets confused thinking they're two different things. It's the same thing. The interesting thing here is it's about how the applications are delivered and how it uses the disk or sim image technology to kind of mount that and deliver the application through the native APIs. So traditional app delivery versus MSIX app attach. So this on the screen, you can see this image is a traditional type of image kind of management delivery mechanism, where you can see here we have sales, finance, and a technical image. And then you've got the common apps and then the particular applications for that department. Yeah, you can use app masking on one image now, but this is how people used to traditionally do it. This is problematic because every time you have a departmental or a group image, you're going to have to manage and update that image, its applications, and that actually has a lot of, resource time for the IT administrator to kind of do. It's time consuming. They could be getting on more important projects, but they're stuck doing BAU, which is a bit of a pain point, right? So how MSIX app attach works with app file containers, and I'll talk about that as well, is you've got your image with the common applications which will not go into MSIX. Yeah, you don't have to have them. I could talk about app file containers in a second, but bear with me. Let's say you've installed the common like Office apps and things onto the image, drivers and Office plugins. They're all in the common. And then what you can do is the profile mounts when the user logs in, as you know, FS Logic's profile containers. And then what we have is your applications start attaching for app attach, ready for use. And as you can see, I've got AFC. And AFC is the FS Logic's app file containers. And basically what that means is if you can't package it as an MSIX because of the application's configuration or whatever, you can actually use app file containers to deliver that. What that means is you can still achieve separation of the operating system for apps. That means that you, as an organization or you admin, is you can basically separate your image, do all your image management and your app management separately, which makes life a lot easier. And that is a true compound desktop. So let's have a look at that. So the operating system, what we have here is the image on its own, compressed down to 8 to 11 gigs. Drivers, add-ins should be installed on that operating system. Then we have the profile disk, FS Logic's attaches, and the profiles on. We then have MSIX app attach. All the apps are attaching either on user logon or on demand, your call, however you want to do it. And then anything which we can't get into MSIX app attach, we can use app file containers, which basically is a file system redirection for the program files. So that enables you as the IT admin to create this utopia type of VDI cloud desktop. So before you can start with MSIX, as you saw in my live demo, was to create an MSIX image. That effectively is you get your MSIX package and then you drop that into an MSIX image. You then configure Azure files, which we're going to talk about briefly, and then you upload the images into Azure files. And then I know it says self-signed certificates, but yeah, I always recommend in large organizations a domain certificate, because it's much better controlled and it's less messing about, but obviously make sure your certificates are installed. So why MSIX app attach? Well, it uses native operating system APIs. So, it's using all of the kind of built-in components from Microsoft, which means there's no vendor lock-in, there's no additional cost to deliver these applications. The other thing as well is we're leveraging, the separation of OS apps and user data, which is what we all want to achieve. This is what we've been talking about for years, really separating out these components so we can simplify management. Low packaging overhead, once it's packaged, editing and updating is not too onerous and difficult, and you can introduce that into production very quickly. And then also low impact because it's attaching to user sign-in. To install the apps on sign-in or install the apps, it has an impact in general, whereas you're attaching the performance testing I've done previously shows that it does offer a better performance metric. So let's look at the architectural blocks for MSIX app attach. So what you can see here is we've got storage. So one of the components required is storage. Enterprise, you should always be using Azure NetApp files. The reason being is Azure files only has 2,000 file handles, limit, which impacts, larger organizations achieving, app delivery on a larger scale. So if you're an enterprise, don't even look at Azure files, always look at Azure NetApp files, which I'm sure that you will do anyway. You need to have access to the Azure Virtual Desktop Management Plane, and you need to have an MSIX image. The app group, you'll need to configure the app groups, which I'll show you in a demo, and you need to have your session hosts. You'll need to have a certificate. You'll need to ensure Active Directory is configured correctly. And the two optional at the bottom there is a private endpoint for obviously security purposes and channeling all of the data privately. And then obviously certificate authority is optional, which is recommended for enterprise always. So they're the kind of core architectural blocks for MSIX app attach. So some tips for enterprise. You want to jot these down. is Azure Files has a limit, as I said, of 2,000 file handles. Enterprise uses Azure NetApp files. It's recommended. Don't use Azure Files in an enterprise environment. Latency, which is an interesting thing, is less than 400 milliseconds. So technically, you could use off-net storage if it has lower milliseconds than the requirement. As I've said, previous slide, always build Active Directory certificate services for enterprise to simplify that certificate challenge. When designing a disaster recovery environment, remember, if you're using Azure Files and you flip over to a completely different region, then file paths, which I'm going to show you in a bit and talk about, will change. If they do, your apps will not work on the other side. So if you're using things like Azure NetApp Files, you can keep the same file path at both sides. You know, there's a bit of design and thought process involved there to ensuring that you can have consistency and service reliability between the two. You can use MSIX app attach outside of Azure Virtual Desktop. So, can you use it on Cloud PC? Yes. Can you use it on Citrix VMware? Yes. Can you use it on other platform? Yes. So, if you want to standardize your app delivery methods, you know, across different platforms, particularly Cloud PC, where there's use cases where people will use AVD and Cloud PC together, depending on the department and use case, then you could actually still deliver them applications in a standard format to a particular bunch of users. And that's an interesting concept. And, you know, people don't realize because the APIs are what controls all of this, all you need to do is make sure you're connecting correctly to the APIs. And there's plenty of products out there which allow you to do it. I think Ventix is one of the products which is really good if you want to have a true hybrid app attach delivery mechanism. So moving on to images. So MSIX images. MSIX app attach images, I should say. So I call them MSIX image. Virtual disk, and then this composite file system image. So we know what VHD and VHDX are. Let's have a look at CIM. So the composite file system is fairly new, not that new anymore. Flat file system, which effectively has 3 components: objects, it has region files, and then it has the CIM metadata file itself, which brings everything together. And this is where all the data volume information is all stored in there. And basically, this offers better performance than all of the other the VHD and VHDX type of MSIX image. And the benefit you'll see is, unless you have the ability to open the CIM, you know, it offers better security and permissions from that perspective. So if you cannot open this, which most people can't unless you've got the right tools, there's a security. And when you do open it, it's read-only. The only way you can edit this is convert it out of the CIM image, make your changes and convert it back. So from a security perspective, this would be the best option ever to deliver your applications because it's truly read-only and it's more secure than the others. With a VHD or VHDX, you can change it to read-write. This you can't. Structure is, there's your MSIX image in blue, the package of MSIX in green, and then the app inside that. The reason why it's shown into 3 sections is you can have multiple MSIX packages, so multiple greens in that blue box, or you can have one MSIX package with multiple yellows, so multiple apps in the single MSIX package. As you saw me capture Notepad, you could potentially capture multiple apps within that same capture. Or you can have multiple MSIX packages with multiple apps in there, or you can just have multiple MSIX single apps in that container as well. So there's lots of different variations. This is not just the set standard. There's various different ways of delivering your MSIX packages in MSIX app attach. And let's have a look at the packaging workflow. So the packaging workflow here is: do you have an MSIX package? If not, create one, then go back to start. Have you downloaded MSIX Manager? If not, go back to start. And then you look here, this is the kind of interesting thing, is there's 3 areas. So using MSIX Manager, you can create a single application quickly, including the process of creating the disk. So you can only do a single app, but once you want to do multiple, because MSIX app attach supports multiple apps in a single MSIX image. So if you have lots of small apps, you may want to bundle them together, right? Just for simplicity. Larger apps I wouldn't recommend, but smaller you want. Are you using, CimFS image? Again, you can only do a single using Microsoft's native tools. You'd have to use third party if you want to do more customization. And then if you want to do multi, the process is much more complicated, but can be done in a VHD, VHDX. So as you can see there are your options today. It's little bit more complicated. If you just don't want to do quick, simple, it's very easy. So you probably will, if you want to invest heavily into this, is probably use a third-party tool to kind of cover the more complex variations. Process terms expanding is basically where it's unzipping and applying system permissions to the application files, known as the MSIX. Staging is where it basically attaches and makes it ready to the operating system. Registering where it goes to the APIs. Hi, this app's ready for this user, register. Delay registration is after the session is established, and then on demand is, they all load on demand, self-service. 5-step flow. So basically you sign in, talk to the host pool, user profiles then delivered, and then your app's delivered afterwards, and the 5-step process is there. There's a book I wrote with Microsoft, a publication. I'll share that information with you at the end of the session, which covers this. And then I call it 9 steps to success. Before you can do anything with MSIX app attach, you need to make sure you've got your file shares and your domain join permission set up. If you do not, you can't pass go, you can't collect 200 as Monopoly goes. So here, you need to make sure all this is done first, then you've got to create your storage and make sure it's all done. Again, this is in the document which I produced. I'll share that with you at the end of the session. So effectively, follow them steps and you'll be achieving success. Certificates, they're a pain in everybody's, So domain certificates, self-assigned certificates, public codes assigned certificates can be used. You need to ensure the certificates are uploaded to the trusted people store. Someone said to me the other day in a previous session, is this user or computer? Well, it can be either, depending on your specification. I'd recommend computer, but if you want to do it specifically per user, then that's fine as well. But remember, if the certificate's not in the trusted people store, your apps are not going to work. So let's now jump over to a little bit of an exploration in the Azure portal, and we can then have a little bit of a drive. So here I've got a very simple lab, nothing fancy, domain controller and 3 session hosts. So if I just go over now into Azure Virtual Desktop, you can use get started and deploy and take care of a lot of the pain points for Azure files and building an AVD environment. So if you go and fill that out, that'll deploy a simple environment. You just then have to tweak it for app attach. But if I go into my host pool here, what you'll see is I've got 3 hosts. There's no issues at the moment. And then if I go down to something called MSIX Packages, you'll see I've previously published a lot of apps. If I click Add, it asks for the URL, the path, right? And you can see here, the image path is a good example there. So just see if I can copy that. He says, go and try and add a path. You'll see it'll then pick up the app. However, if I just do this, you'll get this error, which basically says that it doesn't exist. If this doesn't exist, not found, typically means that you haven't configured the shares properly. Code 400. If you get errors like this, it's either certificates or you've not configured your permissions properly, or the file doesn't exist. They're the 3 variants. And if you do configure it properly, you can do all of this, and it allows you to publish it. Anyway, so on demand, as it says, is we'll basically deliver in session. Log on blocking is obviously when it'll do it. When you'll log on and you'll deliver the apps before you can actually log on. And obviously you need to make sure it's active. If you do inactive, you can't actually use the app. Okay, so then we go over to the app groups. What you can see here is I've done go into apps. You can see you've got to publish all the apps on the desktop app group. So I've just done all them, and then they'll attach. So pretty cool. These are all attached, and you just click add, and you can choose your app which has been published, and then you can put the details and click go, and then that'll basically register in this little thing. Make sure you assign your users or your groups, and then you're good to go. And that's pretty much the simplicity. So MSIX app attach, from an admin configuration perspective, is easy as long as you have configured the core components, which I've kind of just run through briefly, and I'll give you the book stuff afterwards. But effectively, this bit's easy. This is nice and simple. So that's out there. What I was going to show you as well is a lot of information on MSIX App Attach Wiki I produced over the last year or so. So if you go to our MIT blog and MSIX App Attach, there's loads and loads of content in there, how to deal with particular challenges, how to use the community tools I produced. You'll see all that in there, nice and simple. So that's that. And then what I've got and I'll come back to it in a minute, is my app attached dashboard I've been working on, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so back to slides. So troubleshooting. I'm going to show you a demo of the apps in a second, but I want to talk about this. So I also produced another community tool called MSIX Log Explorer for MSIX and MSIX App Attach, which helps you, find some of the challenges and blogs and issues and challenges, all that kind of error codes and things which you need to understand, where it's certificate error, where it's permissions with the file system. You can work this out through the logging tool. So again, in my GitHub under the MSIX App Attach, you'll find MSIX Log Explorer. Before I go on to custo and event logging, I'm going to show you both running some apps in MSIX App Attach and using the MSIX Explorer tool, if that's okay. So I'm just going to flip over to my Windows 11 session, and then we're going to quickly drive that. So I've already published the maps you saw in the list, and they'll be here, and there's a few old games. So when we talk about you can't deliver older applications, there's no way forward, that's not true. We can. Here's a game from 1982, a blast from the past. This is called PARATROOPER. I'm just going to mute that so I don't get deafened. And then basically I can go and play this in a minute when it loads. But effectively we can run all sorts of different types of application. This is running as MSIX App Attach. If I go and do Disk Manager now, you'll see all of these BHTs I mounted earlier, all registered to that machine. So what you can see is we can now play this video game, or arcade, I should say, which is from 1982. So when people say you can't run legacy applications on modern operating systems or as MSIX App Attach, that's not entirely true, is it? So that's that. And then just to kind of do a bit more nostalgia for those, we can do Doom, maybe a bit gory. We've got mRemote NG, which is a good RDP type of tool. When that attaches in, it's a bit of a slow VM, so it might take a bit longer to load some of these. We've got Quake as well. Should we do Doom? Should do Doom. So there's that. That's run as App Attach. Then we've got Doom. So yeah, all the maps you're seeing on that machine are running as MSIX App Attach. So Another World, Doom, all in the black package there. But anyway, so that's that. And if you go into Explorer here, when it loads, it would do, wouldn't it? The problem you've got is when you've got loads of sessions and you kind of just building the lab, you don't always kind of want to optimize and configure it all in full detail, which creates a few problems. Anyway, so I'm going to skip the MSIX Explorer because I wanted to talk about something new, just because it's obviously time is ticking on. So going back to event logs and things in MSIX in Azure even. So in Azure you can create you can customize your logs and things. What I've done is I've basically effectively created a dashboard tool. So what happens is if you haven't configured MSIX App Attach properly, it will basically report them issues. As you can see, I've got no certificate issues, there's no permissions or storage issues, and there's no errors in the last 24 hours. And any logs from mounting disks are shown, any service errors none there, and any SIM mounting as well. So you can see it's mounted one of the apps as a SIM too. So this is something I've been working on in the background, which will replace MSIX Explorer in Azure Virtual Desktop, which effectively makes life much easier because all you need to do is install the dashboard and the event logs, and it will take care of all your problems. So effectively, all of the hardcore troubleshooting you may have had to do in the past can now be done through this. But that brings me back onto what I was talking about before, where we look at event logs. So what you can do too is you can actually set the queries within a signal logic within create an alert, which will basically pull custo query on some of these issues. So if you've got certificate errors on a session host that's been deployed, you'll get notified. And the beauty of using the alert rules is you can do text messages, email, and phone calls. So if you have a large production deployment and you've got problems after a rollout, you can be notified very quickly on some of them app attach issues. You can also apply these rules into all things Azure Virtual Desktop, which is pretty cool. And then, so if I just click onto the next slide, as you can see here, devil in the detail, as it were, you can basically use Custo Explorer and pull out specific issues as well, troubleshooting. So if I go now back to my screen and do Custo, what you can see here is I've got this particular query. I'm just going to run any errors in the app deployment. I'm just going to run that now, and it should really not bring much back. He says, yes, there's no errors at the moment, but if I remove this line here and bring that up, what we should see then is loads of different bits and bats going on there. So you can see that Notepad++ is being staged in there. And there's all sorts of information you can query and pull through on each different one. So there you can go and see it's added Doom on a staging process. So, you know, to try and troubleshoot MSIX app attach has never been easy, really. So when I roll this out in the next couple of weeks, you can have a central dashboard which will tell you all your problems and do all your alerting if you want to. The interesting thing there as well is you can do all of this using the Log Explorer tool. The only difference is you have to install it on each session host. So the problem with that would be you just have to roll this out, and it has to be run as an admin. So by using obviously the new dashboard, the aim and the idea is you don't have to install that application on each session host. Going back to slides. So that's basically MSIX app attach. If you want to know more about MSIX app attach, there's a few things. There's a few books. We'll get through the first couple. Is an introduction to MSIX app attach, which is available on Amazon, and basically goes into a lot more detail about app attach in general. And then you've also got them mastering Azure Virtual Desktop, which has a whole section, a whole chapter on MSIX app attach. We then have a number of publications I wrote for Microsoft during COVID. There was 2 versions of the Quick Start, so it went from Windows Virtual Desktop and it's now, so it's version 2. And then obviously you've got these different. The booking question for MSIX app attach is application management. You can read more about MSIX app attach in there, and some of the things I spoke about today, the methodologies and processes of achieving success with file shares and certificates, is covered in this nice little free book. These are free publications by Microsoft, everybody. So if you don't have them downloaded, I recommend you get there, and you can get them from azure.microsoft.com, US resources white papers, and then you can search them. If you can't find them, you can also find them on my blog. Questions? And I think we are done, if there's no questions. I left 5 minutes just in case for questions, but yeah.
Thanks, Ryan, for the excellent session. I don't think so we have any questions at this point. Wish you a wonderful day ahead, and then we can wrap it up here.
Perfect. Thank you.